totally coincidental. I saw the shawl. I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. She said, well, I was trying to match you before she got here. That's the way the divine mind thinks. It's beautiful.
Call each other ahead of time and coordinate.
Absolutely. Boy, Mary Lynn, how many words are in that middle part? What a great reading that we had, of course, and then also what a great song. I love the chorus. That's a Michael Jackson song, and he's talking about, I'm dealing with a man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. How often does that work? Did you enjoy the gift of the rain last night? Yes. Oh man, you should see my backyard. My turtles were swimming this morning, so it's just wonderful. I'm so happy to be here to talk to you about choosing to pivot from making things reactionary to learning how to respond. There's an old Buddhist saying, all Buddhist sayings are old, but there's a Buddhist saying that says, don't get upset with people or things. Both are powerless without your reaction. Yeah. Anybody here ever play basketball? Yeah. So there's a move in basketball called pivot. And in pivot, it's where you have to keep one foot on the floor at all times, stationary. You got to place it there. You're not allowed to dribble. You're not allowed to do anything else. You have to pass it, or you have to shoot. The thing about pivoting is you have people coming at you. Everybody wants what you have. They want that ball, and so you're trying to guard and you're trying to be part of the team all at the same time. I'm going to tell you a story about a young woman who she was a basketball player, but she knew how to pivot spiritually too. Sue Ann Big Crow. She was born March 15th, 1974, at the Pine Ridge Hospital, which used to be a brick building just uphill from the four-way intersection in town. Now, that's significant because there was only one four-way intersection in Pine Ridge at that time. And if you know anything about the Pine Ridge Reservation up in South Dakota, I'm going to throw you some statistics, not to make you depressed, but to give you a sense of context. At that time when Sue Ann was born in 74, it hasn't changed much now, but it was the poorest county in the United States, 90% unemployment rate. Average medium household income was about $2,000. Alcoholism was rampant. It was the teen suicide rate was the highest in this hemisphere. And so she had a lot going against her when she was born into a beautiful family with her mother and her sister. And Sue Ann Big Crow was, from the beginning, she was very unique in the sense that she was very centered in who she was. She was very centered in her own power. She was 9 years old. She was staying with her godmother on New Year's Eve at 9 years old. And her godmother's son had come home, and he was really drunk, and he ended up getting in a fight with his godmother, and he shot himself in the chest. And so the godmother freaked out. She freaked out. She didn't know what to do. She was crying and screaming. And so Sue Ann, at 9 years old, took charge. And she went over there and she put a pillow on that guy's chest, and then she called 911 and she took charge. She was, okay, you do this, you do that, and everything. And I think partly because of what she experienced and what she saw growing up on Pine Ridge, she decided she would never have anything to do with drugs or alcohol. And this was a big thing. But her coach and former teacher, Raul Bradford, said at one point, he said, you don't understand. Sue Ann didn't respond to peer pressure. Sue Ann was peer pressure. Everywhere she goes, she was like the backbone of any situation. So she agreed to be part of this educational film that was denouncing alcohol and denouncing drugs. And this while she was still in junior high, she was still a very young teenager. And I've seen it online, and she was not blessed with acting, shall we say, like our friend Will would be, but. In this video, she says, don't drink alcohol or drugs. And so that's what she said. What she meant is very, very, very effective. But it was a big thing for her to come out against alcohol and drugs. So when she was, how old was she? She was in 5th grade, and somebody told her, I read somewhere that if you dribble the basketball with each hand 1,000 times a day that you'll get really good. It's what we call muscle memory. And so that's what she started doing every day outside on their little carport thing, dribbling 1,000 times a day, driving her mother and her sister crazy. So then she started wanting to do layups, and they didn't have a basketball goal. So what she did instead, she would go with the drain pipe and the gutters, and finally they just separated from the house and came down crashing. So her mother said, "No more." But she was very determined. So she was a natural leader and a natural athlete. She ran cross country, and she won quite a bit by doing that in cross country. But in the fall of 1987, Sue Ann joined the Lady Thorpe's basketball team. If you know anything about it, was named after Jim Thorpe, who was the Native American Olympian. So she was on the basketball team, and she was a freshman, but she was already on the varsity team. In 1987, the Lady Thorpes were playing the basketball team Leeds, South Dakota. Leeds, South Dakota was their main rival. The thing about Leeds, South Dakota, it was a mining town. It was about maybe 3,500 people, 3,000, and it was tucked up in the hills. The high school was raised up on this big thing, so you're going up to it, and you look like it's very imposing. And you go in there, and it's all these rock walls, and it's really noisy. And they were known for intimidating their the other rival teams. And I'm from Hobbs, and basketball when I was growing up was a big thing. In fact, we had the most winningest coach in the United States by the name of Ralph Tasker. I was there. I was privileged enough to be there when Ralph Tasker was still a coach. I was in the band, and I played drums. But Tasker, when he walked into that stadium, everybody just quieted. Everyone behaved. Everyone knew that this man meant business, but he was also never raised his voice at his players, never cussed at his players, never threw chairs like some coaches do nowadays at their players. He had a sense of authority, and he had a sense of his own power, much like Sue Ann. So anyway, when I was growing up, you always taunted the other team, right? I mean, that was just part of it. We taunted the other team. They would taunt us. I remember we'd go up to Albuquerque, and that was the worst. They would throw stuff at us all the time. I remember playing at a game up in Albuquerque, and I was playing drums, and somebody threw a Jolly Rancher, and it sliced my face open, and I thought, well, that could at least be cinnamon. I don't even like green apple, So I'm just trying to set the stage for you here. So the Lady Thorpes were there, and it was a really big game. It was for one of the finals, and the girls' basketball team, the Lady Thorpes, was in the locker room, and they started hearing this noise from outside in the Coliseum, in the auditorium, and they were doing like these fake Indian calls. Hey, how are ya? Hey, how are ya? And doing the whole tomahawk chop thing. And then the band joined in. You know how musicians are. And so they were playing that fake Indian drum, and then they were playing that fake Indian song, dun dun da 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 da, which no Indian ever wrote. I just got to tell you. But they were playing dun dun da 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 da, and then they were yelling, and then they were waving food stamps, which was to mock the Indians, that they were all on food stamps. And then when the girls would line up just before they went out onto the court, it would be the tallest person first, going down to the shortest person. And Sue Ann Big Crow's cousin, Donnie, she was the tallest, and so she was right up front, and she was looking out and into the basketball court, and she heard them yelling. And then, since they were lined up just about ready to go out, because what they would do, they would line up, and they would do a lap around the court, and then they would go to their side of the court, and they would start doing layups and warm-ups. But this time, she heard them yelling, "Where's the cheese? Where's the cheese?" That's a reference to, if Native Americans are lining up, well, there must be some cheese involved, because they got commodity cheese. And so, they were just, on one hand, they all say that they were just, it was what you did, that they were kidding, but it really intimidated these young women. And so Donnie, the tallest one, she turns to the other. She says, "I'm not going out there. I'm not going out there." And so Sue Ann Big Crow, she says, "I'll go first." And she took the ball. And so her cousin says, "Don't embarrass us, Sue Ann. Come on. I'm not going to embarrass you." So she runs out there, and they all kind of follow her. And then she stops in the middle of the court, and they all kind of run into her. And so she's hearing all this drumming and all this chanting, and hey, yeah, hey, yeah. So she throws the ball to her cousin, and she takes off her warm-up jacket, and she puts it like a shawl, and she starts doing the Lakota shawl dance right in the middle of it. And she's doing the Lakota shawl dance because she was a powwow girl, and she had won all kinds of awards and done these beautiful dancing. And then they got louder and louder, and so she started singing the Lakota song. It was a really beautiful song that I don't know, unfortunately, but she was singing it. And so the other team was just, hey, huh? They just stopped cold. And so they were watching her, then all of a sudden it was just quiet. And she was singing and she was dancing with just a conviction. She was just like, oh, this is good music. They must be honoring me, right? And they're not mocking me. They're honoring me. So she starts dancing, then they get quiet. And then she grabs a ball from her cousin, and she runs, and she does a lap. She goes up, and she does a layup, and it sinks in. And the crowd goes crazy. The crowd erupts. So Sue Ann, she wasn't being particularly heroic or brave or anything special. She was just being who she was, because she was so centered in her power of who she was unmoved by the provocation. She didn't react, she responded. She just made the assumption, oh, this must be a good thing. And boy, that's a hard place to get to, but with practice of 1,000 times a day on each hand, we can probably get to that point too. Well, she unfortunately was killed she and her mother were killed in a car wreck with a drunk driver a couple of years later. But to honor her, they built the Sue Ann Big Crow Recreation Center on the Pine Ridge Reservation. They also named the Boys and Girls Club after her. They set up scholarships in her name. So if you go there now, you can see all of that. So her legacy, of course, is just continuing to inspire people. So did Sue Ann react, or did she respond? She responded. Reactions are something different. When we react to something like say when somebody cuts us off at the grocery store, or somebody doesn't know how to use a roundabout there, and which is everybody. I just stop. I'm like, okay, just go. I'll go last. I don't mind. Or when somebody posts something you disagree with online, or when they make a comment that seems to be personalizing you and your opinions and your belief system, it's so easy because as humans, we have fight or flight or freeze. That's just who we are. It goes back to that limbic part of our brain, to the reptile part that just says, I must eat, or I must run, or I must fight. So when you're reacting, you're not really thinking. There's no filtering process that's going on. You're running on autopilot. It's kind of like, we've all raised puppies, and if you have a puppy who's not trained and he barks at everybody, and the dog barks at everybody and jumps at every passing neighbor or dog, or tugs on the leash and will eat your hamburger when you're not looking, or if you're looking, that's reaction. Responses are more thoughtful. When you respond, you explore in your mind the possible outcomes. How is this going to be played out? How is this going to work? What do I need to do to change this situation? They're more like a well-trained and well-behaved dog who comes when you call it, barks only when there's a reason, and of course waits patiently for the treat while he's drooling. That reminds me of a joke. This dog went to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist says, tell me, Fido, what can I do for you today? The dog says, well, it's always good dog this and good dog that, and why is it never great dog? So I agree. There's a quote that says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our own response lies our growth and our freedom. So we're all aware people. We don't react to anything, obviously. We can watch the news without changing our breathing pattern, right? Of course we can. But as we teach ourselves to shift from the reaction to responding, from unconsciousness to mindfulness, we have to remember our place. What is our place? Where are we now in this time and space, and this time of our evolution, and this time of our spiritual growth? So I've come up with an acronym to help us remember that. And the acronym is PLACE. The first word, P, standing for pause. As soon as you notice you're triggered, I suggest taking a slow breath. A slow breath is always good, and then stopping and pausing to let some space into your heart area. Simply breathe in. Just take a breath, as we always say. The next one is L, which is label your reaction. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Is this frustration, insecurity? Is this hurt? Is this anger? Is this resentment? What am I feeling? Don't put a judgment on it. Just ask yourself, what am I feeling? The next one, of course, is ask. Ask yourself, why? What actually triggered you? Is this linked into some thought pattern? Is this linked into somebody who may have wronged you in some way? Because often the emotion is tied to something below the surface of the actual thing that's going on. The next one is C, which is choose a skillful response. This is where the magic happens, folks. As you take the step back, consider what matters in this situation. What is my intention here? How do I want to be? Who do I want to be? What is the ideal? And that's a big goal, but what is the ideal self that I can be in this situation? So you choose that response. The next one is E, empower yourself. Empower, bring yourself into power. To move forward from that place of awareness so that you can invite a healthier, a more evolved outcome. You know that when you choose to react in a different way, it's my understanding from the studies that I've done and my life experience, when you choose that, when you choose to make a more evolved response, you help us all evolve. We are constantly evolving. We're part of the same mind, part of the same consciousness. Where we come from the same consciousness, we share everything. So it's all part of that. So choose that evolve. It takes practice, it really does, but you can create a muscle memory like Sue-Ann dribbling 1,000 times a day. You don't have to do that, but just try it in small places. And I suggest the best place to try, of course, is with your family. There's no buttons there. But let's be examples of inspiration for each other. So I'm going to end with a really great poem that I found that I think really surmises what I'm trying to talk about. It's a poem called Clearing by Martha Postlethwaite, beautiful piece. It says, do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forests of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands, and you recognize and you greet that song, and only then will you know how to give yourself to this world, which is so worthy of rescue. And so it is. Thank you.